Hello, it's Martin from Wisely Automotive and I'm in our Hyundai IONIQ 5. I've just collected it from a service, it had some recalls done as well, and given I'm right by the A2, I thought it would be a great opportunity to test out some of the driver assistance features, because we have done similar videos of the Porsche Taycan and the Tesla Autopilot. I will leave that linked in the top right hand corner of this video, but the IONIQ 5 has some unique features which we have not really seen in any other car. And of course, it's not only about ticking a certain feature in the spec sheet, it needs to be implemented properly, so that's what we will test out today. Just for the record, we are located in the UK and this particular IONIQ 5 is a 71 plate, so it means a late 2021 in the premium trim. That is quite important and we will discuss that later in the video, because the features do differ a bit between trim levels. Just so we are on the same page, because Hyundai loves to use a lot of acronyms throughout their marketing materials, user manuals and so on. All of these features can be grouped into three distinct categories. Firstly, you've got the safety features which always run in the background even when you're driving fully on your own, and the car will do its best to make sure that you don't crash into anyone. Next up is the convenience stuff, which you can enable yourself and let the car do a portion of your driving, or at least assist you in the driving to take a bit of a workload off of the driver. And lastly, you've got parking features to aid with maneuvering tight spaces at low speeds. With that out of the way, let me put Canterbury into the sat-nav system, because the car will actually benefit knowing where exactly our route is taking us. Obviously, if you're running something like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you do not get the same level of integration as with the built-in system. So we will see how we get on with that. And let me get driving. So drive and off we go. By the way, love the IONIQ 5, the gear selector very reminiscent of the BMW i3, super smooth drivetrain, nice suspension, but we can talk about that when we are en route, or maybe even do a separate video if you're interested. I will not be testing any of the safety features because there are professionals which do it, mainly the Euro NCAP safety tests, which now have incorporated active safety into the crash test procedure, so they can do that. Public roads are definitely not the place for that. Just so you have an overview of what the car is seeing, I will scroll through these tabs in the instrument cluster display into the driver assistance view. You see the information kind of spreads out on the sides and the car will show us what it's detecting using its sensors. So I've just joined the A2 and I'm still driving fully manually, but there are some safety systems which are pretty much always on. I will slow down a little bit here under the speed limit and you will see as the car on the right is passing us, the blind spot monitoring information is not only showing me a little warning symbol in the wing mirror, but I also get that projected into the instrument cluster, and if your IONIQ 5 is equipped with the head-up display, it gets shown there as well. The car is using radar sensors located in either corner of the rear bumper to see the cars coming from behind. The second thing is the infamous lane keep assistant. Some people absolutely hate them because they can be a bit intrusive, especially on narrow country roads where the car is trying to make sure that you don't run off the road, but in the end it means it's very, very intrusive with the steering inputs. On the IONIQ 5 it activates above 40 miles per hour, so on a road like this it's on, and you can see that by the little green car symbol in the instrument cluster with two lanes besides it. That means that the car is detecting the lane markings and there is nobody besides me, so just for demonstration purposes, if I move closer to the right lane, it tugs on the steering wheel a little bit to assist to keep me within my lane. Obviously it means the car will just keep ping-ponging from side to side. In the UK, all IONIQ 5s are equipped with the navigation-based smart cruise control. I've already used it on the way to the service center and it has been really good, smooth, even at low speed, almost standstill traffic, and of course doing really well on motorways and A roads. To activate it, basically all of the driver assistance stuff is controlled on the right side of the steering wheel, so I just need to press the cruise control button and now I can release the pedals. And you see that the car is trying to maintain 50 miles per hour and a following distance of 2 out of 4. This is pretty standard stuff, so for example I can press the follow distance button in succession and the car will either close the gap or extend the gap depending on my preference. Interesting that on A roads, which are technically not motorways and we are in dense traffic, it does let you undertake. But back to the topic, you can set the following distance and also the driving dynamics of the cruise control change depending on which mode you are in. So if I go into sport mode, it will accelerate a bit more eagerly, it will close down the gap a little bit quicker. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if I go into eco, it's going to be a little bit smoother and not as keen to go ahead. But let me go back into normal and show you the one thing which I've never seen on any other car. If I press and hold the following distance button, the adaptive cruise control switches into what's called my driving style. So the system learns how you drive, it observes your following distances, how quickly you like to accelerate and so on. If you want to, you can go into the settings in the main screen, and here you've got a detailed analysis of what it has learned. Obviously, if you're sharing the car between many different people, you can reset the driving style analysis, or you can just manually adjust any of the parameters. But now it's basically driving as close as it can to how I would be driving. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it has actually done a pretty good job, because in London you do have to have a close following distance and you have to close down your gaps very quickly, otherwise people will just keep cutting you off. You see, and even when the car pulled off, it very quickly locked onto the correct vehicle in the lane. It didn't slow down unnecessarily. It's just a very smooth and refined system overall. No complaints here. As I mentioned, the navigation-based features can be adjusted in the driving convenience section, where you can have motorway automatic speed changes based on the navigation data. It's important to mention it's only based on the navigation data, not based on what the camera detects from the speed limit signs. And secondly, it only works on motorways. Lastly, while we are still on the A road, I can turn on lane following assist, which is a single press of the steering wheel button on the right hand side of the controls. And as you see, now a little green steering wheel symbol illuminated in the instrument cluster, and that means that the car is actually steering pretty much on its own. You see, if I, for demonstration purposes, let go of the steering wheel, the car is not only ping-ponging from side to side, it is actually maintaining the middle of the lane. And as we are passing the 70 mph zone, let me put the cruise control speed up to 70. The system accelerates smoothly, and the moment I put on the indicator, it lets go of the steering wheel so I can change the lane on my own. And once I'm in the new lane, it locks onto that one seamlessly. I don't have to press any buttons, unlike with Tesla's basic autopilot system. So it's very easy to keep the system on, but you can still do some parts of the driving yourself. While we are comparing it with Tesla, the lane centering, I would say, is not as robust as Tesla's autopilot. You see that the steering wheel moves a little bit more left and right. It's not as confident in the middle of the lane. But on the other hand, it means it lets you put a little bit of steering input left and right without you breaking away from the system. So for example, if there is a pothole or some debris on the road, you can just lightly nudge the car to one side of the lane, and that doesn't disengage the lane following assist. A slightly strange thing on these Hyundais is that even if you cancel the cruise control, so I will do that now by pressing the pause button, and I'm taking over manually, the lane following assist still stays engaged. And if you want to disable it, you can do that individually. So you can mix and match whether you want lane centering done by the car or just the distance keeping, or both. Before we get onto the actual motorway, which is the M2, and more features will be activated because some of the highway drive assist features are geo-restricted to only motorways. One little hack is that you can press and hold the steering wheel button with the lanes on it for a couple of seconds, and that will disengage lane keeping assistant. So if you live somewhere rural where the lane keeping is too intrusive for you, you can quickly do that right from the steering wheel. You don't have to dig through the menus. Let me put that back on, because for better or for worse, because of UK legislation, actually European legislation, that system always defaults to being on every time you turn on the vehicle. I know it's a bit of a shame, but at least there's a quick way to disengage it if you don't like it. The good thing is that settings like your preferred following distance or whether the cruise control follows your driving style, that is remembered even between restarts of the car. Let's squeeze into this lane on the right. Yeah, nicely done, smoothly matches the speed of the vehicle ahead, no freaking out. They're being pushed from behind a little bit, so if you want to accelerate manually, you can still override the system by just pushing the accelerator pedal. So I will pass these vehicles and then merge into the left lane. Yeah, this is the reason why I say that adaptive cruise control systems are pretty much a must on any modern car, because it makes traveling just so easy and relaxing. And in the IONIQ 5, the seats are nice and comfortable. The cabin is very refined if you're cross-shopping with something like a Tesla Model 3. So especially for kind of broken UK roads, this is a fantastic long distance cruiser. Obviously you also have the 800 volt system with the very fast charging. Now this is where I'm afraid all of these adaptive cruise control systems fall apart, because it also relies somewhat on the discipline of other drivers. And understanding how passing lanes work is just not a thing in the UK. Look, I need to go over 2 lanes just to pass this Toyota CHR, which is doing 65 miles per hour in a 70 zone in lane 3, of course, because why not? And is completely oblivious to that fact. Never mind, resume cruise control. Look at that, even in these mild curves, the IONIQ handles that perfectly fine. Now is probably a good time to mention that this is very much a driver assist system. You see that after a while the car prompts me to apply a little bit of pressure on the steering wheel, and that is because you are still very much in control. These systems are far from perfect, so definitely treat it like it. It's nice on a long journey, but it doesn't mean you can be on your phone texting, scrolling on Instagram and so on. And this is where exactly you see it kind of falls apart compared to a Tesla on these steeper curves. It just doesn't center in the lane as confidently. And even though the lane keeping assistant was beeping at me that I was departing the lane, it still was not applying the correct amount of steering angle to keep me in the middle. Whereas with Teslas, they are absolutely rock solid. And we're getting passed by a Mustang Mach-E, Tesla Model Y in front of us. Who said that EVs were not catching on? We are officially entering the M2 towards Dover, as you can see from the overhead signs. So it will be interesting to see the exact moment when the car transitions from the adaptive cruise control system and the lane following assistant to the full-on highway driving assistant, which should be a little bit more clever. You see, press OK button to enable lane change assist, OK. And you see, this is the moment we have transitioned onto the motorway, and now the car is actually detecting the other vehicles around us, just like Tesla's autopilot view does. And the HDA symbol is lit up in green in the instrument cluster, which means that the highway driving assistant is on. Likewise, we've got the automatic lane change enabled, as indicated by the little symbol with the lanes and arrow on either side. Unfortunately, it still is very much keen on undertaking vehicles. So let me manually go into this lane. There's a little bit of chaos here. You can see it really tracks all the traffic ahead. I will resume the cruise control. And as you can see by the green nav symbol, by the speed, it will automatically change its set speed based on the GPS data. As I said, it's GPS only, not camera based. It should mean that, if there is a sign on the side of the road on the off-ramp which indicates the speed for said off-ramp, the car shouldn't get confused by it. But on the other hand, it means you still have to be very vigilant, because it will not recognize things like temporary roadworks and obviously information from digital overhead signs. Now let's say I want to move out of the passing lane. I just put my left indicator on. I have to put a little bit of steering input in to confirm that I'm initiating the lane change. As you can see, you get an animation on the screen showing that the car is changing lanes. It checked the blind spot, and when it's safe to do so, it just moves over into the appropriate lane. So you see, this is about as full-featured as it gets for the system when it's driving on motorways. It's a bit of a shame that it's restricted to motorway use only. I understand the logic. Hyundai wants to be sure that it only works on roads where there are clear lane markings, nothing unexpected happens, no pedestrians and so on. But especially in the UK, we have a lot of dual carriageways where this system would have been perfectly suitable if it was in this higher state of smartness, with a lot of speed limit changes, and if it assisted with the lane changes. So for example, now as we are starting to gain on this vehicle ahead, I will let the red Kona pass us, and I just need to do a single light tap of the indicator, apply the steering input, and you see, even in the curve, it really smoothly transitions. It's not a jerky movement to move into the next lane. It was very good at calculating the trajectory to ensure excellent passenger comfort. And now with lorries moving over as well, no panic. Tesla's autopilot sometimes freaks out if you're close to a lorry or a lorry is in a narrow lane which you are passing, but here no problems so far at all. And all of us in the team have tried the system on many occasions and we haven't really had any problems with phantom braking. So as long as you just want a very reliable adaptive cruise control system and you know that it will not try to be too smart, it really does quite well. Yeah, I'm really impressed by the auto lane change, and as you can see, it keeps this turn signal on until the very moment that you are all the way in the appropriate lane. And even though we had car in the back, it knew that it was back far enough, and now the moment the lorry clears our lane, we will start smoothly accelerating, but still keeping a safe distance from the van ahead. So for example, now it's at conditions not met because there was a vehicle which I wanted to get in front of in this lane, but the system still allowed me to change the lane on my own without any jerky movements in the steering wheel. And you see, even when the lane splits here, the lane centering is really reliable. The car doesn't suddenly jump over to center itself in the widened lane. What can I say? It just works well. Not too smart, but sometimes Tesla's autopilot smart is too smart for its own good. So I think with current state of things in the world of technology, this is a very adequate level of system to aim for. To be fair, I think that's enough, so I will now disengage the system and I will take over manually. I will also turn off LFA because I find it very strange when the car steers for you but you are in control of the acceleration and braking. And we will take this upcoming off ramp so we can turn around and start heading back to the office. I can cancel the routes. And cruise control back on. You will see that if my speed is not exactly matching the speed limit, so now if the cruise is set to 71 miles per hour in a 70 zone, that nav symbol is not lit up in green, meaning that the car will ignore the navigation data and it will just stick to whatever you have it set to. But the moment I lower the cruise control to 70, all of that gets lit up in green, meaning it will follow the mapping instructions. I suppose the last thing we need to discuss are the different trim levels, because there are many combinations and many features which you may be thinking, oh, is it worth going for the extra? Well, all IONIQ 5s, as I mentioned in the UK, come pretty well equipped. So even if you go for the base model, in terms of driver assistance, you still get the navigation-based smart cruise control, the lane following assist, and basic highway driving assistant, meaning the first generation of it. We would say premium is the sweet spot. It really was the best value for money. Not only in terms of driver assistance, but you also got features which we would consider must-haves on electric cars, like heated seats, heated steering wheel, and on a car of this size, front parking sensors. Otherwise you only get rear ones as standard. On the driver convenience side of things, the highway driving assistant gets upgraded to the second version of it, which includes the automatic lane changes, the more advanced display where it shows you the traffic around itself when it's engaged, in other words, when you are on motorways. And lastly, it should also support offsetting when doing the lane centering. So for example, if you're passing lorries which are quite close to the lane marking, it should automatically scooch over in the lane a little bit to allow a bigger gap between you and the large vehicle or the vehicle which is following the lane closely. Now, I'm afraid from the time I've used this system, I've not seen that happen once. So definitely don't worry about that feature at all. I would say the biggest difference with the HDA2 is literally just the inclusion of the smart auto lane change. Because even though this interface is quite cool where it shows you what it's detecting around itself, that, as I mentioned, is not present when you're not on motorways, and it also is not present when you're stood still on motorways. So how useful is it really? I quite like that, for example, now I wanted to change the lane a little bit quicker, and when you put a bit more force into the steering wheel, there's no panic from the car. It just lets you subtly know that conditions were not meant for the car to do the automatic lane change, but it just lets you do it, no problem. Also, if I may comment on the built-in sat-nav, it's quite good actually, even though some people will probably say, oh, Waze is the best thing ever, or Google Maps is the best thing ever. The way it shows you turn-by-turn directions, lane information, and the detailed junction view, it's really quite well done. The automatic scale also works well, and obviously you can also have the instructions right in the instrument cluster in case you want to have something else on the main screen, like for example your consumption and battery information, which the IONIQ really shows quite well, because if I go into energy consumption, you can see what exactly is using power and how much it has contributed to the overall consumption since the start of the trip. But let's get rid of that and let me go back to the map, because I'm definitely capable of getting lost even this close to London. And let's see, now this is the transition from the M2 onto the A2. And you can see that HDA is now no longer active, but the transition is very smooth. There is no beeping, there is no drama. And you see, even as that lorry pulled out into the lane ahead, given I had the indicator on, the adaptive cruise control did not freak out. I did not need to intervene myself. It just means that now I'm doing lane changes on my own. What a first world problem. Yeah, and you see, even after the car has just left the lane, we are already accelerating, so it's not dropping the speed too far before it starts moving again. That can be a common issue with some adaptive cruise control systems. And this was a tricky situation because, as you saw, there was a line, a crack in the middle of the road, which looked like a lane, but the IONIQ 5 figured it perfectly fine, did not freak out, stayed centered in the actual lane. Also, while we are on these good roads, let me test out what happens if I don't respond to the hold hands on the steering wheel prompts. So I am now just keeping my hands closed in case anything goes wrong, but I will pretend I've kind of fallen asleep or had a heart attack. So I'm first getting a visual warning on the screen saying keep hands on steering wheel. It's still going quite well. Now I'm getting beeping. There's nobody behind us. I mean, it's beeping, but this is quieter than my alarm. Okay, now deactivated, and you see, unfortunately, it degrades from the LFA system into the LKA system, meaning that it just keeps ping-ponging between lane lines instead of slowing down in the lane, putting the hazard zone or beeping the horn, anything like that. So points away from that, you can at least re-engage those, so it will keep on going. There is no strike like you would get on Tesla's autopilot. And now we are approaching the 50 mile per hour zone. I will slow down manually because the car would not have done that on its own, because we are not on a motorway. So setting the speed to 50, and I will let it do its thing. I suppose the last thing you need to decide on is whether you want to go for one of these premium cars, which there are many of on AutoTrader, or whether it's worth stepping up to the Ultimate, which is the highest trim level, at least for this model year. Before I get accused of being biased because I'm trying to sell you this one, rest assured that with my speed of editing, by the time this video goes out, this car will probably be gone, but you can always check out our AutoTrader. Maybe I'm going to be rapid for once. The Ultimate is, in my opinion, not really worth going for. If you just step up from premium to Ultimate, you do not really get any additional driver assistance features in practice. What it allowed people to do is to spend even more money and go for a dedicated technology package, which then included some other goodies on top of that. On the driver assistance front, mainly the 360-degree camera with the top-down view when you are parking, and just like with other Kia and Hyundai products, it would also project the blind spot view into the instrument cluster when you put your indicator on. So yes, it is a neat feature and it's quite well implemented, but is it worth narrowing your search down from hundreds of cars on AutoTrader just probably to a couple, because even not all Ultimates have that technology pack? In our opinion, not really. There are many other things to consider when buying a car. Secondly, it also adds the smart remote parking assistant, or whatever it's called, which works a bit like Tesla Summon, meaning you can use your key fob to move the car in and out of a space. Again, neat feature. Would I say that I miss it with this IONIQ 5? Not necessarily. It just obviously, if you like your gadgets and technology, maybe it's something to keep in mind. It's also not all that simple, because you would assume that as you go to newer cars they will have more tech on board, but because of the COVID supply shortages, the IONIQ 5 features a front camera and radar for the adaptive cruise, so all of them still have that. But this 2021, if I go into the settings, there's a shortcut. You can just press and hold the OK button when you are in the driver assist view, and it takes you directly into the driver's assistant settings. There is a forward safety cross-traffic assist, which uses radars in either corner of the front bumper, very similar to the ones on the rear, but this time around for checking that there is no high-speed traffic coming through when you are approaching intersections. Those front corner radars got dropped later on in, I believe, 2022. They may be back in 2023. I will need to double check that. I will try to put a note at the bottom here if I find out a definitive answer, but again, it's something to keep in mind, and unfortunately it's not always straightforward when buying these cars. If you are after anything particular, you can always drop us a call, email us, and we can explain to you what cars in our portfolio have and which one would be the best fit for you based on your particular needs. Again, in terms of performance, I have nothing to complain about. Even when the lane marking disappears, it had to follow the curb a little bit. It manages fine. We were driving into the sunset pretty much all the way back, and I haven't had any dropouts, no problems, especially if you are coming from something like an i3, which many of you watching probably are. This really is a next level of a system in terms of reliability compared to the i3 system, which was based only on a single camera and software processing from essentially 2013. Just out of curiosity, let's see what's the energy consumption. Since start we've done 56 miles. The weather is quite mild outside, only 23 degrees Celsius, so the aircon is not working too hard. 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour. So I think, considering the size of the car, not bad at all. Let's see, car moves off to the left, and immediately, even though it was not fully in that lane, the IONIQ 5 has already realized that it's not interested in that one, and it's following the van ahead. Super well done. And now, because there's no lane on the left, it has dropped out that information, so the lane following assistant is not available. The system is a standby as indicated by the grey steering wheel. Anything in that top row of icon, if it's grey, it means that those systems are in standby, whereas if they are green, they're actually engaged and working normally. Let's see, I'm interested how it does in this curve, because it's quite a steep curve. Obviously, we are not doing 50 miles per hour at the moment. LFA has locked on, but not bad, and it slows down smoothly for the standing traffic at the traffic lights, and it will come to a complete stop. Oh yes, one thing I've noticed when I was driving in stop and go traffic, the dwell time on the adaptive cruise control, meaning how long it stays stopped and it will resume driving for you, is super short. So you see now it asks me for accelerator input to confirm that we should get going, and this is a very stupid lane design, because basically 3 lanes go into 2 with no proper lane markings. Let's just overtake manually here. So that's one more complaint about the system. It just, even if you are stopped for 1 second in an urban environment, it will ask you to confirm with the switch or just by lightly tapping the accelerator pedal that you actually want to get moving. It may work differently when HDA is engaged, because I can get behind the logic that Hyundai wants to make sure that you don't accidentally run someone over, but it's a shame, because otherwise it would be a lot easier to use the system even in stop and go conditions in day-to-day city traffic. I'm now in front of the showroom, and I'm intentionally positioned this way because the last thing I want to demonstrate are some of the parking features. So if I go into reverse, the parking sensors come on, and you also get the camera view. As I mentioned, this being the premium trim, you only get the single reversing camera, but you still get very good guidance lines and distance markers, so you know exactly how far away you are. But here we have a very common scenario where I'm trying to back out of a driveway and the visibility is not the best, because we've got a little wall and the fence right over there. So instead of creeping backwards and just hoping for the best, the IONIQ 5 will use the radar sensors on each corner of the bumper to let me know whether there's any obstacles coming. So you see, I just barely peeked outside and it's already letting me know that there were cars coming from my left. Now if I go a bit further back, you see it detected that car from the right, and again, even though there is a lorry parked on the side of the road. And I'm not only getting the warnings in the screen, the steering wheel is vibrating, and also the blind spot monitoring warning indicators in either of the side mirrors also illuminate. It's 7:30 p.m. It's usually quiet on Weymouth Road, but of course today there is so much traffic. Yes, we did detect the cyclist as well. Excellent, but there is one more feature which I want to show you. So this is again a very common scenario where, let's say, you are parallel parking You pull up to the curb, excellent. You go into park, all secured. Turn off the car and you're about to get out. And now there's a car coming, so if I try to open the door now, I get a warning saying watch out for traffic to make sure that I do not fully open the door into oncoming traffic. As you could see, it does work for cyclists as well. And to be fair, with these modern cars, if they have the hardware installed, there is no reason not to include these, because the number of accidents we see where either the driver doesn't realize, or especially the passengers, because they do not have a proper view of the wing mirrors, open the door into oncoming traffic when they are rushing out, it can usually end up in pretty bad accidents. Yet it's such a simple solution with all the sensors on board already. I think that's about it. This video is probably over half an hour long at this point, so hopefully your questions got answered. If you still have any, leave them in the comments below and we will do our best to get back to you. Also let us know what you think about the IONIQ 5, especially this one with this pretty rare matte color. That paint is a whole topic in and of itself. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Like the video if you found it useful and see you in the next one.